Federal government is facing calls this morning to extend its JobKeeper program to more people after an accounting bungle delivered a $60 billion windfall. We're joined now by the Assistant Treasurer, Michael Sukkar. Good morning to you, Minister. You now have $60 billion you weren't expecting. Jane. We know this is borrowed money, but if you've already done the sums, why can't you extend it to people who were initially left out? We're talking aviation, university workers and people in the arts.
Well, importantly, Jane, this scheme is a demand-driven scheme, so it will be there to support 3.5 million employees, some 800,000 businesses. That hasn't changed, and so it is there and fully available. But as you rightly point out, this is borrowed money, and the original $130 billion figure that was estimated by Treasury was just that. It was an estimate. It wasn't an objective. It wasn't a target. And so in the end, this is just $60 billion less that Australia has to borrow, and in the end is $60 billion less that probably our children and grandchildren have to repay.
Well, in an interview last week, you said that JobKeeper was doing its job because more than 6 million Australians were going to benefit. And you also said in that interview that if it was only 3 million, there'd be more likelihood of wholesale changes to the scheme. Well, now there is only 3.5 million Australians, so do you stand by that?
Well, Jane, of course there's a review that will be conducted by Treasury. This is a review that we'd always planned to undertake at the half-time mark, and no doubt with the changed reporting of numbers, of course that will feed into that review. But again, this is a large scheme by any measure, 3.5 million employees covering 800,000 businesses. So I don't think anyone can accuse it of being a small scheme. And again, it needs to be put into some context of the entire suite of reforms and support that the government's put in place, whether it's cash flow boost for small business, whether it's the job seeker payment of $1,100 a fortnight for people who can't get JobKeeper, early access to super, and of course stimulus payments to households. So there's an entire suite of support that we put in place. JobKeeper, an important part though it is just one part. It is doing an important job, but in the end, again, the health outcomes have been better than we thought, and I think that means the economic outcomes have been slightly better than what was originally expected.
But does that review mean you would consider extending this program?
I'm not suggesting that, Jane. What I'm saying is, of course, the review will take into account the updated figures. If we were getting reported the figures that we had all understood them to be, about 6.5 million employees, it's turned out to be 3.5 million because of reporting issues that were put in place by particularly the applicants who overestimated the number of employees that they had. That has now been reconciled. Of course, the updated figures will form part of that review, but I'm not suggesting, Jane, that that's necessarily going to be a catalyst for changing the program. The program is doing an important job, as has been intended.
But under this program, then, why is a job in hospitality more important than, say, a job in the arts or at a university?
Well, there's no ranking of jobs.
But some people are getting it and some industries are not, which would suggest that there is.
No, the parameters are there for all industries, all businesses and all sectors. If you're a very large business, you have to have had a turnover reduction of 50%. If you're a small or medium business, you have to have seen a reduction in turnover of 30%. Those parameters are there. They are economy-wide. They apply to every business equally. If you fall into it, then yes, your employees are entitled to JobKeeper. If you haven't seen the requisite reductions in turnover and your employees don't fall in, but they are unable to work, they lose their job, then they are of course entitled to the job seeker payments. So again, JobKeeper is one very important part of support, but it's not the entire picture.
There are a lot of people who do feel left out by it. The opposition leader, Anthony Albanese, says this is a mistake you could have seen from space. If you got this wrong, can people have confidence that there aren't more errors on the way?
Well, I think Australians do have great confidence in the suite of measures that we've put in place, including this scheme. Again, the $130 billion was an estimate. It wasn't an objective. It wasn't a target. And as the health outcomes have been better than we thought, the economic outcomes are better than we thought. When Treasury came up with the estimate of $130 billion, it looked like the peak of coronavirus would be much worse. It looked like restrictions in the economy would go much deeper and much longer. So as that's improved at a rate better than we thought, of course, the cost of JobKeeper to Australian taxpayers has reduced, and I think we would all celebrate that because the benefit to the economy has basically flowed from the outstanding work that's been done in a health sphere.
I think you are going to face a lot of pressure to find somewhere to spend that $60 billion regardless of that. But Assistant Treasurer, thank you for your time this morning.
Thanks so much, Jane.